There are moments in every leader's life that don't go the way they predicted. This show is about speaking through those moments. I'm Margaret Watts-Romney, and this is Speakership in the Time of Change, the communication podcast for established leaders who are done leaving their most important moments to chance. Today, we're exploring the word speakership so you can learn its origin story, spot what it looks like in the wild, and see how one exercise can help you name it for yourself. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Speakership in the Time of Change. I'm your host, guide, fellow traveler, and consistent learner, Margaret Watts-Romney. So let's talk about this word speakership. What I've noticed when I say this word speakership is people at first light up, like, oh, yes, I know that. And then they stop and their eyes squint a little bit and they're like, wait, what is that? What are you talking about? Let me tell you where it came from. So back in 2014, I was a coach for TEDx Salt Lake City. So there I am, standing in the wings, backstage, in the dark, on the night of the event. I was supporting the speakers, walking out on stage, delivering their lines, and then coming back celebrating. We had been working together for months on their talks, and one thing that brought them all together was being nervous. They were from different industries, they were speaking on different topics, they were different ages, but they all loved a TED Talk. They all had found meaning and purpose and interest in some talks that had helped their lives. And now they were about to go on the stage and give their own. And they were preparing for that moment. And they all wanted to really rise to the occasion and give it their best. They were speaking on a huge range of different topics. Someone was speaking about neuroscience and meditation. Somebody else was talking about animal welfare. Another person was talking about teenage activism or gay rights and marriage, or even using powdered crickets in protein bars. So as I watched each one of these speakers go out on the stage, take their spot on the red dot, and deliver all of their ideas and energy, I was so proud of them. I was so honored to be a part of it. I was really in awe of everything that they were giving to that moment. And they would come back off the stage and we'd give high fives and hugs and congratulations to all of them. And after the event was done, the audience gave thunderous applause, even some standing ovations. And we all took off to the after party afterwards, where there was singing and even some dancing and, of course, a ridiculous photo booth. And as I was standing around talking with the speakers, we talked about how the event went, how they were so proud of each other, how they remembered that one line that they'd forgotten so many times before, how they were so proud that that one person gave that one speech and told that one story with such energy. And then the conversation turned to what's next. And they all started talking about what was coming up after this. Each of them had been so engaged with their own ideas, with their own projects, that they were going to continue, of course. And they talked about where they would be speaking about this, who they'd be speaking to, and what results they wanted. And in all of this, they also turned to me and asked questions. How do we keep this going? What do I say when I'm on a panel discussion? What's the best way to bring on a new team member? Or even, how can I talk about this with my superiors, with my boss, with the upper management so that this project can continue? How can I keep going? And actually, in that moment, my stomach kind of dropped because I didn't know. In my own world, I was rather new to this project of helping speakers communicate. I was really familiar with their pattern. I was really familiar with what we had just done of picking one idea and deeply working on it and then presenting it to an audience. That's the same pattern that I'd been doing for the past many decades in my former career as a cellist and a teacher. You pick one piece, you pick one idea, You go into a study room, you go into a practice room, you practice for hours and hours, and then you go and you present that on the stage to an audience. This is exactly what the speakers had just done. So now that they were talking about what's next and the different rooms they were going to be in and the different audiences, they were going to be speaking where there wasn't time to prepare. They were going to be in spontaneous conversations. They were going to be in meeting after meeting where there wasn't 6 months to prepare. They would have to give hard feedback. They would have to hear hard feedback. They would have to motivate entire teams. They would have to collaborate with other companies, with other organizations to move their ideas forward. And I had no idea what to say. But what I did know is that I would love to keep working with them. I was so inspired by the work they were doing, the ideas that they had, and this puzzle of how do you gather your words and your presence to move ahead the thing you want to create in the world? How do you move your idea into the future with what you say? So after all of the after parties, I started thinking about it, and I realized that each one of these speakers, each one of these creators and these leaders, they'd actually already been talking about this for a long time. For the people talking about marriage equality, they had been in public and in private conversations, having conversations about laws and how they could be changed. Some people had written books. Some of them had created new companies. Some of them had gone to school in this. So these were all topics that they had talked about already in many different arenas, to many different organizations, many different people. So I began to see that my time with them was just a blip, was just one moment, a special moment that they'd prepared for and worked really hard for, but their work, their ideas, their words had started long before they got to the stage and would extend long after they left it as well. And that's when the phrase came to me, speakership is leadership. I saw that what they'd been doing all through time and with other people had been part of their speakership. That phrase inspired me to figure out more about this intersection between speaking and leading, so I dove in. I coached over 100 TEDx speakers, I supported a dozen events across the globe, and I asked questions of each organizer, of the other coaches, and of the speakers themselves. How do you tell a better story? How do you decide which parts of your own story to tell? Or how did you do that? How did you move an audience from the state they were in when you began your talk to being in a completely different state of mind by the end of your talk? I studied in a master's program of strategic communication. I rewatched great talks to figure out, why did some moments land? I read books about communication. I nerded out with apps about brain physiology to learn why some stories felt like a sparkler in my brain. Over our next episodes, we'll talk more about all of the range of speaking and speakership and where it shows up, and especially in moments of change. But let's focus now back on speakership and what that means for you. So let me tell you what this looks like from where I sit. One of the speakers, Pat Crowley, had talked about water use in agriculture and how animal protein took a tremendous amount of water to produce some ounces of protein, and how instead his company was using much less water to produce crickets to then use as protein in protein bars. But this wasn't the first time Pat had stood on a stage to talk about this intersection between water use and humans. He had been immersed in the natural world for his entire life. Earlier, he had been a participant and a leader in the National Outdoor Leadership School, or NOLS. Earlier in his education, he had studied land use and water use and did research on how agriculture was using water in the West. Wherever he went, he was interested in this touch point between people and the natural world and natural resources, and asked questions about how to make it more sustainable into the future. Even in his personal life with his family, I see pictures of him on the river in a boat with his kids fishing. people, water, resources, all coming together. So where was Pat's speakership in this? He spoke all the time, and his speakership kept developing. His speaking skills kept developing wherever he was. Sometimes he was delivering an international TED Talk. One time he pitched to the sharks in the Shark Tank. Sometimes it was working with investors to tell them the story. And all along the way, he built his speaking skills. Sometimes it was storytelling to be entertaining. Sometimes it was storytelling to let investors know what was going on. Sometimes it was persuasion so that he could convince his team on a new idea. Sometimes it was collaboration. Sometimes it was listening. Sometimes it was showing up to an industry event and just being the odd duck in the room. All of it was his speakership. All of it was his presence and his words and his content, showing up in spaces, showing up in different arenas so that he could move his ideas forward. If you want to hear more about Pat's story, including how he prepared for the Shark Tank and got a deal with Mark Cuban, you can find it in Chapter 1 of my book, Speakership is Leadership. So what does this mean for you? Well, when you can pinpoint where you're going, what you've been doing or building or working towards over and over consistently in your life, then that idea can bring more purpose wherever you are, whatever job you're doing. It can help bring a light or bring energy or bring clarity about what you're doing and what you need to say next. So my question is, what have you created that has brought you satisfaction? And I choose each of these words pretty carefully. It's not, what did you win an award in? What did you do best? What are you proud of? What did people compliment you on? No, it's what have you created? And when I use that word created, I mean it pretty broadly. It's not just artistic creations of poetry or painting. Did you create a group? Did you create a friend? Did you create an event or an experience? Did you create a team? The other word I use carefully is satisfaction. I don't use win or best. What gave you satisfaction? What felt good? What afterwards were you like, yes, that is the thing that I wanted to do and I made it happen? So when I work with my clients, we go through an exercise where we ask this question and frame it at different parts of their life, sometime in youth, sometime as a teenager, sometime as a young adult in your early 20s, then in your 30s and beyond. What have you created that brought you satisfaction? And I've seen fascinating stories come back. I worked with one leader who was in healthcare tech. She described a birthday party she created as a child. She invited people, she planned the food, she planned the games, she decorated, she cleaned the space beforehand, she sent out the invitations. Everybody came over and they had a marvelous time. She was so proud of that. She told me about another time in her life as building a following as a yoga teacher. She told me about the way that she had studied, the way she had practiced, the way that she built relationships and invited people in. She told me about the satisfaction she got at work of working with other people and preparing big projects, and the satisfaction when things got executed well. We saw through these and other stories that she shared that wherever she went, she was bringing people together in a fun, safe, happy, and healthy environment. Her speakership was about togetherness and health and joy. Another client I worked with, she was a banking and finance tech specialist. Earlier in her career, she had built a platform to financially help disaster victims, bringing people together across distance in order to make things better, in order to create something new. She also felt deep satisfaction from serving on boards, from working with others to give counsel to companies, and to help them figure out what was next for them. She loved mentoring young leaders and entrepreneurs, helping them see their path and helping them become the leaders that they wanted to be. Throughout all of these different arenas of disaster victims and boards and young mentors, she kept seeing a pattern that she loved bringing people together, being a part of collaboration to inspire creative innovation. One thing you can count on me for and find in our upcoming episodes is a bit of armchair brain nerd science. I find original academic research to explain what's going on behind the scenes. And here's what's happening in your brain when you find the words to describe your speakership. It's an experience called narrative coherence. This is what happens when you use your life stories to make sense of who you are and where you fit in the world. It's seeing yourself consistently through time, through different stages and different places and different relationships. And when you have this narrative coherence, studies show you have a higher life satisfaction, fewer depressive symptoms, and even fewer psychiatric symptoms. I'll put links in the show notes for the cool science. But the place where all of this happens is a place called the default mode network. It's the thing that turns on in the middle of the night when you're not actually thinking about anything, when you're not focused, when you're not studying, when you're not trying or striving. It's essentially a story-making part of your brain. I found it a funny story how this default mode network was discovered. When the functional magnetic resonance machine was first accessible, scientists were having a great time mapping out different areas of the brain, having people go into the scanner and do puzzles or think about things or look at pictures, and they would map which parts of the brain lit up. On one day before one experiment in particular, they put someone in the machine and asked them to just rest quietly while they were getting the experiment ready. But when they looked at their sensors, actually the brain was going wild with mad activity. And they said, no, you can just rest. You don't have to start the activity yet. The person said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just hanging out. And that's when they found out. That's when they saw this area of the brain that is high in activity every time we're not focused, every time we're not trying something, every time we're not actually engaged with a task. This region actually has the highest baseline metabolic activity, suggesting that when we're not doing things, when we're not focused, our brain goes into storytelling mode, goes into a place of trying to figure out what's around us and where we are and make up stories about it all. Your brain needs stories. It makes sense of the world by seeing people and places and predicting what will happen next, including yourself. Your brain loves to see a through line of the story of you. All of this can be kind of grand, life through lines, story of yourself. But speakership in practice actually is small. It's just how you show up and the words you choose in your interactions with others. Speakership can look so big that it's hard to wrap your head around it. I was talking to one client who was thinking about working with me, and she was rather concerned. She said, I'm not really speaking. I'm not up in front of crowds. I don't present that much. I'm never on a big red dot with a spotlight on me. I'm not sure I need to work on my speaking. And I said, that's fine. Your speakership is something bigger than that. But let's talk about what you are interested in. What is going on with you? What are you wanting to do and make happen differently? And what she talked to me about was her relationships, the difficult ones with one boss, but the easy mentorship, collaborative way she had with another boss. She talked to me about the team she had underneath her and how she needed to inspire them and how she needed to set a direction for them. She needed to think strategically. And we realized that all of these relationships, this change that she wanted to have or the ways that she wanted to show up, all were based on what she needed to say. They were all part of her speakership. So, what is your speakership? What have you been showing up and talking about? What motivates you? What's your idea of the future that makes you feel excited? What's something that you want to share with people around you? Ask yourself what you've created, not what have you won or been praised for, but what did you make that gave you real satisfaction? Ask this question of yourself across every decade of your life, and the pattern that repeats is your speakership. Tune in next time to hear from the youngest boy to pitch on Shark Tank, how he went from perfect memorization to growing up into a job where there's no formula and the ground shifts daily. Yep, he's in AI. Jack Bonneau on what happens when you put down the script. If this episode gave you something useful, follow us, share, and leave a review. It helps us support leaders everywhere. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.